Welcome to Mom Matters. I'm your host, Alyssa Dver. In the next 10 easy-to-watch minutes, we're going to give you practical tips for more productive parenting. We're here today talking about a really important subject about vaccination, and the question whether to vaccinate or not to vaccinate, I know, is on my mind as a parent and probably all of yours as well. And we have an extremely very knowledgeable expert on this topic. Dr. Sandra Nelson is joining us today. She is a pediatrician and an infectious disease specialist at the Massachusetts General Hospital Immunization Center. And we are very grateful for you to be here today because I know you've got a wealth of information to share. So the first question, just to get into it, is what is a vaccine to begin with?
Well, a vaccine is a tool that we use to prevent infection. Usually when a bacteria or a virus enters the body, it takes several days, but the virus and the bacteria continue to reproduce and can cause significant damage before our immune system learns to recognize those organisms and control the infection. A vaccine is a tool that we use to trick the body to induce an immune response before we actually encounter the natural and more dangerous forms of the virus and the bacteria. There are several types of vaccination. Most vaccines that we administer nowadays are called inactivated vaccines, which just means that they take a protein or a substance from the virus or the bacteria, and that's administered to the child and induces an immune response. But in and of itself, it has no ability to cause harm because it's not an intact virus or bacteria. There are, however, a few vaccines which are made with weakened but live versions of the viruses themselves, which actually do go on to reproduce inside the body, but because they're weak, they don't cause disease, and yet they still induce an immune response.
Okay, and I know that they are giving vaccines not just through needles now, but also some through the nose, and in other countries, I believe, orally still.
That's true. Most of the vaccines that we give nowadays are injectable. There is the newer live influenza vaccine, which is administered in the nose, which is very effective for healthy children. And there are some vaccines which are administered orally, although in general we're not administering those to children in the United States.
Okay. Well, talk to me a little bit about what is a required vaccine and who decides what's required.
So the vaccine requirements are made at the country, at the national level, but in the United States, specifically at the state level. So recommendations vary by state, and it would be worthwhile asking your pediatrician as a first resource which ones are required in your state. The vaccine requirements are implemented at the child care setting or at the school setting, where they monitor for compliance with vaccine recommendations.
And the types of vaccines that are required would be things like
diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, or DTaP. Hepatitis B is usually required. The Haemophilus influenza vaccine is usually required, along with measles, mumps, rubella, and polio.
Okay, and I know there's a whole menu of optional vaccines. What kind of things fall in that category?
So the vaccines are optional in that the states don't require them, but they're very strongly recommended by the scientific and community organizations which have reviewed their safety and their effectiveness. And those include a larger number of vaccines, including influenza, chickenpox, hepatitis A, for example, which are strongly recommended. And in understanding whether or not, or in deciding whether or not to pursue some of these vaccines which are optional, it's very important to remember that although they are optional, these diseases are very real, they circulate in the community, and every year there are children who die of these vaccine-preventable diseases.
So in other words, better to get the vaccine and not risk getting the disease than any of the side effects that the vaccine could cause.
Absolutely.
Well, we are going to talk about some of the potential side effects because I know it's on parents' mind, but we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we'll focus in on specifically some of these issues tied to vaccines. Hi, this is Alyssa Dver, the host from Mom Matters. I wanted to tell you about this really excellent resource for parents. It's called Parents for Parents magazine, and it's really unique for two reasons. First, it's the only magazine I know of that focuses on one parenting topic per issue. So it gets really deep in the topics, and all the articles are written for parents by parents. I highly recommend it. Check it out at www.parentsforparentsmag.com. Welcome back to Mom Matters. We're here talking with Dr. Sandra Nelson about immunizations, and I know there's been so much in the news about the potential tie to autism and other effects. So I wondered if you could comment about what are the potential negative effects for both healthy and maybe not so healthy children getting immunizations.
Well, Well, there are several side effects which are quite common with vaccinations and generally are mild and self-limited. Those include pain at the injection site, redness, swelling, tenderness. There are a few other vaccine-specific side effects that are generally mild and not to be alarmed about. For example, with the chickenpox vaccine, a small proportion of children will go on to develop a rash which actually looks like chickenpox. But there are two potential concerns that I get asked a lot about. One is the issue about thimerosal, which is a preservative that has been mostly removed from vaccines. But there have been some theoretical concerns that because it contains a component of mercury, that it can cause problems with neurological outcomes, developmental outcomes, and there have been some concerns about autism. However, there have been several very well validated studies looking at the link between thimerosal administration and the later development of either autism or adverse neurological outcomes, and in fact there have been essentially no links medically. And to make you feel safe, thimerosal has essentially been removed from all of the pediatric vaccines administered to small children. The other question that I sometimes hear is about the relationship between the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, or MMR, and autism. And there have been reports over the last 15 years or so that maybe there's a relationship between those two. And largely that's due to the temporal association between the administration of the MMR vaccine, which is usually given at about 15 months of age, and the signs and symptoms of autism, which usually develop in the second and third year of life. However, again, several very well validated epidemiologic studies which have shown that there doesn't seem to be a correlation at all between MMR administration and autism. I will say that while there is continued to be a debate in the lay literature about the link between vaccines and autism, in the medical and scientific community there is really not a controversy. It's a non-issue.
That's really good to hear. I know going to get a shot with your child is very stressful, and then you hear this news, and as a parent you sit there saying, you know, is it a good thing or not? So really appreciate that information. For people who want to get more information on the latest and greatest on immunizations or just some background, can you suggest some resources for them to look to?
Well, two great websites. One is through the Centers for Disease Control,
www.cdc.gov, okay.
/NIP, which stands for the National Immunization Program, has a wealth of resources for both healthcare professionals and parents about vaccine administration.
Excellent.
The other is called the Immunization Action Coalition, which is www.immunize.org, another great resource for vaccine-related questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is such an important topic, and you really gave us some important information. I want to close today's show and invite all our viewers to visit our website, which is mom-matters.com. You'll find information on previous shows as well as upcoming shows. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Alyssa Dver, for Mom Matters, giving you practical tips for more productive parenting.